All right, welcome to a very special episode of Mostly HVAC. We're renaming the podcast to Mostly HVAC. So, if you didn't listen, a few days ago, Ian and I got into one of our spirited debates where I was telling him I'd come up with this great plan to make my new house nice and evenly cooled, evenly heated, and Ian said I'm insane. And so my plan hinges on a company called Flair. And after needing to call in some backup, I looked up the Flair company, found the CEO, reached out to him on Twitter, and boom, here he is to take my side, hopefully. So welcome to the show.
Yes,
Thank
welcome.
you. Glad to be here. Yeah.
So you want to give us a little bit of background, and then we can dive into the debate?
Absolutely. So my name is Dan Myers. I'm one of the co-founders at Flair. I know your audience is somewhat technical, so I guess my sort of overplayed joke is that I'm a recovering engineer. So can sort of speak that lingo, but have done many things at this point. And we've been building products for the HVAC space for about 10 years now. We kind of approached it from the tech side and then moved into the almost mechanical engineering world of HVAC, if you will. And we do a variety of things. I think some of the ones really relevant to what you guys were talking about the other day and what we can get into, as well as things for the central forced air market, right? But also ductless heat pumps. We support a lot of electrification programs across the country. And load flexibility, so integrating HVAC systems with the grid. So a pretty broad set of focuses for the business.
I don't know, Ian. Sounds like a pretty serious professional company to me.
No, that's fine. I mean, is that Flair or is that other companies you have? Because the Flair website doesn't, talk about any of that stuff as far as I saw.
Yeah, no. So Flair actually does all of it. What you see on our website is primarily directed at a consumer funnel, realistically, right? But we sell actually both through the consumer world. That was our sort of origins back when Kickstarter was all the rage. We didn't actually do a Kickstarter, but it was sort of the just bootstrap yourself world, right? And then as we've grown, we've moved into the professional HVAC channel. When it comes to grid integration, things like that, I mean, usually it's just an email conversation, and having a consumer funnel makes the most sense for our sort of main home.
Okay. All right.
So, all right, Ian, do you want to start, or
well,
should
let's jump in. Yeah, let's jump in because we want to keep this episode pretty focused on Aaron's house. Okay, I think this is like kind of the core thing. So we're gonna go with a very specific use case. So, I think you watched. I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but basically Aaron has not level heating and cooling throughout his new home. How big is your house, Aaron? How many square feet? 3,500?
Oh
4,
gosh, I want to say 3,000, 3,500, something like that.
Okay.
2 stories, 3 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms downstairs,
plus associated rooms and all that stuff, right? So pretty good size house. So, I guess there's a couple ways I feel like you can handle this. How I've handled this in my life is to have the HVAC guy install a damper system in the ductwork, and there's a second Nest thermostat in another room, and great. Like, it goes the 2 directions. So, like, in our case, where we have 2 zones, it's just upstairs. Like, the kids' room get their own stuff going on, and our bedroom gets our stuff going on, and the damper turns on and off. I don't know the exact even technical details of how it works. All I know is it dampens airflow in some way, flaps presumably, and closes things off. It baffles things.
Yeah,
I think they're actually called dampers. I was calling them baffles, but
shoot,
that's fine. But you install it once. It's hardwired in. I haven't thought about it in 15 years since we built our house. Aaron has this idea of using the Flair products, which are on the end of each output of every air duct in every room. You put on this damper system, and they're individually Internet of Things devices, and they have you need a thermostat in the room, and you need
and they're battery powered. Don't forget
a plug and play network adapter to run it all, and all this stuff. So I guess
let me recap on the other side. So Ian's got this big complicated system that requires probably installation while building or while remodeling. It doesn't sound like you can just like,
you can
just go in there.
Complicated. It's one thing. It's literally one thing.
It's somewhere in the attic or in between floors or something like that.
That's true.
And then you got to get some second thermostat. So now you're running dual zones, but like some rooms are on certain zones, and maybe those are hot and cold rooms, but they're on the same zone because of the way that the HVAC is branched. And he's on about this battery thing, and I'm telling him the batteries. Insanity. I read on the website, Ian, and everything you read on websites is true, that the batteries last for at least 3 years. And
but you're gonna have 200 of them. See, that's the problem. You're gonna have 200
so he's
new
caught
batteries.
Up. All right. He's caught up. Let the unbiased arbiter rule and tell me why.
I don't know about unbiased, all right, Dan,
but
the highly biased,
take it away.
but knowledgeable CEO of the company is going to tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, certainly have biases here. Happy to acknowledge that. Right? So I think there's like a lot of different things there. Maybe I'll start with a couple of them that seem like the most straightforward and obvious. The first thing would be the ease of putting in traditional zoning, which is sort of what Ian you've been describing, right? Mm-hmm. Varies a lot, right? If you are in, say, the Northeast and you've got a basement and an attic that's easily available or accessible, you can climb into the attic, put in dampers, run your 24-volt control lines back to a zone control board, and figure all that out without too much pain. Great, right? Like that is certainly an option that exists. When you talk to most HVAC professionals, what you'll find out is that they don't do a lot of zoning. They do some, but they don't do a ton. And there's a couple of reasons, right? One is it tends to be pretty expensive. Satisfaction tends to be kind of modest, right? And part of that is because it's not very granular, right? Which I think Aaron kind of alluded to a little bit. And then the other thing is it's pretty expensive, right? I think, you're splicing into ductwork. If that's rigid, if that's flex, that really changes things. But one of the big ones in a retrofit context is actually that oftentimes the ducts are not particularly accessible. So if you've got to go deal with drywall and finished spaces or hardwood floors or something to try and make a modification to how the ductwork performs, it's just really hard and really expensive, disruptive, that kind of thing, right? So, I will say this, like, I think there's a place for traditional zoning, right? Like, I wouldn't rag on that. I think that's super reasonable. When you're in a context where that's really hard, that's certainly one of the places where Flair is a slam dunk. So, I don't see us necessarily as saying traditional zoning is a bad thing or a bad concept in any way. In fact, on our product roadmap later this year, we'll probably release some damper controls, right? Because we're, to give some context.
Gotcha. We won you over, Ian. You're a fan now.
There we go.
Yeah, I mean, so for context, right, the business is called Flair, but the platform behind all of it is called HVAC OS, right? And so our worldview is kind of like, we're really interested in just gluing together all the disparate pieces, right? And some homes are really simple. They just have one system, it's centralized and stat, and you're done. Other homes, particularly in places like the Northeast with a lot of retrofit activity right now, promoted or sort of pushed along by electrification efforts, are really varied. You've got a mix of ductless and boilers and some central on one floor and all these different things and dampers and zoning and you kind of add it all up and you're like, yeah, something needs to coordinate these in a way that's not, a zone control board from 1980 and a bunch of relays that like, you can't really control any logic on, that kind of thing. So we are definitely sort of, sometimes we like to say we're software wrapped in plastic in that way, which I think was another point you had pointed out previously, maybe not today, but which was sort of, okay, well, this is a connected product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't think that's the risk I think you highlighted was, all right, well, if it relies on servers, you run the risk that like, okay, well, what happens if the company disappears? And we've been around for a decade, but IoT companies have certainly failed, right? So I think it's a fair point. It's not unique to us per se, but it is a broad connected product concern. I have a internet connected robot lawnmower, a cat litter box, all these crazy things that I'm like, yeah, it would suck if they just turned off their web services, right? What I would say there is along those lines, we sort of understand and anticipate that. We also have a lot of customers demanding offline support because they're in some cabin in the middle of nowhere, or just their internet connectivity is not great. So actually, we released a product, I guess it was about a month ago, called the Bridge, right? It's just this little, it's literally like the least exciting product ever, probably, right? It's a box for networking. And while it does not yet support an offline mode, that is essentially one of the things that we hope to release onto it as an over-the-air upgrade. So I think we see that concern. We think it's a fair concern. We don't have the answer today, but it's one that we're planning for, which I just think is fair. So, I think that you were right in pointing out that risk to a product that's connected. And then the other one, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to pause there for a second and say, I think one thing that Ian and I didn't highlight yesterday or the day before, whenever it was the retrofit versus the do it from the beginning. Because Ian, is this house you're in with the dampers? Did y'all build this house?
We did build the house, but it was actually done retrofit. Like after we lived there for like 3 months or something, we were like, oh, this ain't working. And then they went in and retrofitted it. So it was a retrofit. And yeah, we are in the Northeast in our case, and it's like a house, and it wasn't too big a deal. I don't remember the exact details, but it was not crazy to get done. The guy went up in the attic and added the thing and whatever. It was no huge deal. So I think that is a good point of like, to me, it's like, sure, if I live in an apartment building, right, and it's like I can't get to anything, I'm not allowed to cut into anything, I can't get to anything, it's just this air comes out in a crazy way, it's like, yeah, this product makes total sense. Or even I have my own use case for it. I was like, you know what, this would be cool, like in our master bedroom, there's big lofted ceilings, and then there's the vents up there, but sometimes I'd like them to face different directions than they do, or maybe even close one off or whatever. But it's like, am I gonna get out a 14-foot ladder to like go do that? Well, yeah, that would be cool, right? To have this one room has a special need that maybe a product like this works even for a situation where you could handle it other ways or whatever. Or even the traditional thing with the little slidey, yeah, like that works if I can get up there, but I can't get up there. So let me have a way to automate that. But yeah, I guess that's just when you're doing every single vent in your house, I guess that's the thing. And so would you say that Aaron should first go? So let's keep it on Aaron, right? Like, should Aaron first go?
All right, let me explain where the vents are and stuff, and then you can ask the question. So,
I mean, they're all over the house.
I'm focused on the first floor. Most of the vents on the first floor are in the floor. And so they come out from either very low in the wall, or some are actually on the same plane as the floor. Weirdly, in the kitchen living, I have 2 vents that are overhead. And so where are these ducts? I don't know. I'm not an HVAC scientist, but it seems like they're everywhere, right? And so I've got these rooms downstairs with I think I counted maybe 10 vents across the 2 bedrooms and like the dining living area. And then upstairs is an entirely different question. I think the vents upstairs are more accessible because, above it is some attic space. So that's kind of the system I've got. And so Ian's question is what?
Well, yeah, does it make sense? And if you're in a big house and there's presumably, like, he's got the attic, he's got space, like, does it make sense to just go to HVAC guy first and do the traditional way if that's going to be the most straightforward? And then, yes, if there's like a problem, it makes sense for a product like this, or obviously we can come up with other scenarios where this product makes total sense. So, I'm not against the product. I'm against, maybe in Aaron's case, it just being the default first choice solution until there's
so much cooler
that there's not an easier, simpler way to do it. So I guess what would you say about that?
This is the simple way. Sorry.
No,
that question wasn't to me. That question wasn't to me. All right, Dan.
The regular HVAC guy is going to be cheaper than this. If
no
it's
way.
straightforward.
So I think,
it just
is.
Have
some assumptions there that I think we could sort of jump on.
Right. Poke holes.
But let me frame it a little bit. So zoom out and then we can zoom in, right? So first thing is, it sounds like you don't have a multi-zone system from the get-go, because ironically, we also sometimes get installed in a system that's already zoned. because
Interesting.
you're zoning maybe east-west or north-south or upstairs downstairs, right? And then you still have temperature issues.
It sounds like you have two zones, don't you, Aaron?
I don't
you have
know
an upstairs and a downstairs zone.
Yeah, I don't know if it's multi-zone. We have 2 outdoor units and 2 indoor thermostats, but the 2 thermostats don't talk to each other. They're not aware of each other at all. It's just upstairs, downstairs.
It's just two separate systems, right?
Yeah.
So that makes a ton of sense. And then, I guess let's just take your one floor, right, to start, right?
Yep.
So what is the unevenness there, right? You have one side that gets hotter than the other during a certain time of day. Like, what is the thing that actually happens?
Yep. So both bedrooms are on one side. So it's our master bedroom and then the bedroom for the youngest set of twins. And those rooms get quite warm. And then the living room, so like living, dining, den or entertainment or whatever you call it, that is all kind of open. It's not totally open floor plan, but it's kind of open, and that stays pretty comfortable. But the back 2 rooms get quite warm.
Gotcha. So your choice, and I got in trouble with one of our integration partners for making it this clear, right? So you have, if you will, your sort of main living space, and maybe I'll flip it the other way. You have your main living space because you're in Texas, and it stays nice and cool. And then you've got these bedrooms that kind of run a little bit warmer the whole time, right?
Correct.
Yep. And your option to solve this would, of course, be to just level shift that problem, right? Like without any mechanical intervention, right? Just run the system more, right?
Yes.
Now, what we would suggest is, okay, we're going to go in and we're just going to levelize that if you want, or even maybe bias it slightly the other way, right?
Okay.
And that is fundamentally sort of what you get with mechanical actuation here, right? As opposed to purely just a remote sensor type strategy that you could buy with your Ecobee or your Honeywell or something, right?
Okay, so a remote sensor strategy just tells the main thermostat, hey, it's hot in there, keep going. And a mechanical actuation says, hey, it's hot in there, let's shut off some cold spots to direct some flow to the hot area.
Yeah. So, the remote sensor strategy for some people is actually maybe a better first step than any of the things that we've talked about, right? To Ian's point, right? Like I might even suggest starting there. In fact, most of our customers have already started there, right? So oftentimes rather than buying our little puck wireless thermostat, which is cool, but is admittedly pricey, right? Compared to like a $40 Ecobee remote sensor.
Right.
You can at least see, am I satisfied enough with a remote sensor in this other room, right? And maybe the amount of additional runtime is incremental enough where you're just like, you know what? Great. I don't actually need to do much more here, right? So before I'd even call an HVAC guy, I think that would be my first DIY move, personally.
Cool. That never came up. Okay, that's a good strategy. All right.
And that'll presumably make it even colder in the main areas, right? But maybe that's the trade-off that's worth it or whatever.
Yeah. And so you're just going to level shift and you might decide, oh, actually, it's good enough, right? And then if you decide, actually, I really hate the amount of cooling I'm sort of additionally putting into this other space, well, that's where, an actuator all of a sudden becomes a reasonable move.
I want to be eco-friendly, or at least pretend on the internet to be eco-friendly. And so I need to not cool the other room and cool my room only.
So do you think, though, there's an education issue here in that, like, Aaron's plan was just to go in and replace all the vents on the first floor. But maybe you don't need to replace all the vents on the first floor. Maybe you only need to replace certain vents on the first floor.
Yes. And so, I mean, this is actually, as a business, one of our biggest challenges is, like, I think we have a really neat little offering for a lot of people. But educating people on what we make is like pretty non-trivial. So I will, certainly admit to that. Any day it's just not an easy thing to sell on some level because you really have to think about things. I'll add to that. Another thing is, let's say you consistently don't get enough air in your twins' room or rooms. Well, why would you ever close a vent in that room?
Correct. Great question.
Right?
You just saved me $119.
Or maybe more, right? So now you might want a temperature sensor in that room to make sure it's running enough.
You
right?
just saved me
Gotta get a
$19
puck.
because
Yeah,
I
so you
still
gotta
gotta buy the
buy the
puck. Yeah,
Still have to buy the
exactly.
puck.
Shoot.
But you know, the point being that like typically the way that it makes
That's a
the
good
most
point.
sense for homeowners is the rooms that, relatively speaking, get more air are the
Mhm.
candidate rooms for a smart vent. And the rooms
Great.
that you
Love
care
that.
about a temperature in are the rooms where you want a sensor.
Love that. That's a
Right.
great idea.
So you know, to kind of address, oh, you're going to have, you know, a semi truck's worth of batteries, and you're going to have a huge bill, and it's going to far exceed an HVAC contractor's cost. You know, more typically what we see is people who buy just a small number of units that go into a key sort of a couple strategic rooms or places, and you can usually make a pretty big dent in the problem there, right? And people
love that.
admittedly also have different motivations for a product, right? Some people buy it because they're like, I'm trying to solve a comfort problem. That's probably like the painkiller application. The vitamin application is, I actually just want to kind of control rooms more independently on a central system, or I want to run things a little bit less, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hot room, cold room problem was honestly what got me started on the business. I grew up in South Florida. I lived in Chicago, you know, went to school in Chicago and lived there for a while. Experienced extremes on either end.
Seriously.
Saw the stupidity of the sort of existing ductwork problems in American homes and said, okay, somebody's going to be dumb enough to try and fix this, right?
Mm-hmm. Why not me?
Yeah, literally, right? So that was kind of the origins, and I think that problem's still around today, right? And that's what we go after.
Yep. All right, Ian, what's your ruling? I feel like that's pretty balanced. That's a pretty measured response.
No, I think it's all been good. I actually think my 2 cents is like, I think you guys should totally change your website around that. Like, I feel like a lot of the stuff on the website I saw, it didn't go through every page, but it was like, the example is vents in every room, right? And then I think you go and do that math and you're like, well, there's a puck in every room and 2 vents and blah, blah, and 100 batteries and $3,000 and whatever. And you're like, I mean, this is just my take. Like, this is why I said it to him, right? He's like, that seems crazy. But if it's like, oh, like, solve your hot room problem or whatever, or solve your cold room problem, and it's like, oh yeah, buy this for 2 rooms, and you can redirect the existing airflow correctly just by doing this. That seems great. It's like, oh, $500. Yeah, I could do that, and it's only 4 batteries instead of 25 or whatever.
Right.
Like,
And,
that seems more reasonable for most people's application. Like, obviously, we could come up with like, yeah, you should do every vent and all that stuff, but
yeah. And
the other thing is, we got a lot of this feedback online was like, if you use these everywhere, existing systems don't like back pressure. So what's your
we
back
got that
pressure
so
story?
much. Like, be careful about back pressure, and I'm like, yeah,
Your house is gonna literally explode from the back pressure. So
there's somewhere deep in Reddit is this hilarious post about, like, I think it was must have been a customer of ours who just wrote this like incredibly sarcastic but very creative article
Reddit,
on how you know, smart vents might destabilize the universe, right? And it was sort of it was a great write-up. I'll have to find it and share it if I can.
Oh, that's great.
But you know, the back pressure concern, I think, is fair, but nuanced, right? So the first thing is, and I'll try and spare you like the deep dive on HVAC, but the world of HVAC lives on what they call call logic, right? Call logic meaning, do I need cooling? I'm calling. Do I not need cooling? I'm not calling, right? And so your traditional zoning system will, in fact, kind of reduce down to as few of zones as calling is needed, and close off other, branches or whatever, right, in the ductwork. Right. We don't work on traditional call logic. Right. And so there was this Lawrence Berkeley National Labs paper that said, that researched smart vents. Right. And this was like,
oh, hell yeah,
the mid 2000s. And they found like, okay, if you close 60% of registers, and this was in California homes, so it can vary, certainly regionally. But in this case, in California homes, that's when you would start to see equipment complaining. Right. And the equipment has what they call like high limit trips. It has all sorts of different features to make sure that it doesn't get too stressed, right? So what we did is we just said, let's apply 100% safety margin on that, and we'll never close essentially more than a third. We do have some like pressure sensors on board, but we've just found the 1/3 rule is both effective. Like we're in tens of thousands of homes now, right? With no issues. It's also just easy to communicate to a user, which is a big deal, right? Like we're offering a connected experience. Like, why is this vent doing the thing it is? Well, actually, that's the thing that matters to a lot of users. And if you can articulate that cleanly, it's a big deal. So I would just say, like, I think most of the back pressure concerns comes from I've got 9 rooms that have enough cooling. I've got 1 room that doesn't. You're going to close 90% of the airflow and, choke
blow out the windows in the other room. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're like, no, we did think about this for at least a hot second before we built the system, right? And like did some homework. There's a lot.
So if I read your FAQ correctly, that also for that 1/3 calculation, you take into account non-smart vents because those are presumably left open all the time. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And I will say the sort of exciting future of our business there too is
you heard it here first.
Yeah. The way that the industry is moving is not on and off type systems, right? Where I'm just pushing, however many CFM through the system, or I'm not. It's moving towards modulating systems. And so for us, actually, that's awesome, because what it means is soon you'll be able to say, I care about 20% of my square footage for these hours. And I'm going to run the equipment at 20%. And actually, now you've really re-engineered what your ductwork is able to deliver, right? On a granular level.
Cool.
So that's one, like, we're working with some OEMs, things like that, to kind of build that future right now. And that's becoming more of a reality in the market. In the meantime, when you're working with what they call fixed tonnage, or single speed or maybe 2-stage or something, we just operate with conservative rules, and generally speaking, that it's pretty effective.
I like that. That's a good answer to the back pressure question.
Yeah, that's good.
We've been working on this for
I'm shocked that a bunch of HVAC people had actually thought it through. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
All right, I think it's good. Maybe, Aaron, we could stick around for another minute just to wrap up. But
I have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
I have one more question before we do the post show. Do you have plans, or is it already integrated into that like that open source home assistant thing that are you familiar with that, and is it integrated into that?
Yeah, we have there's a guy, I think I'm going to like totally butcher his name. Robert Dranovic, I think is his name. So just give him a shout out. He has been building diligently for years now this really excellent integration with Home Assistant. So we have an open API.
Great.
And so
individually addressable vents.
You can slap the system into manual and do what you could run your own algorithm. You can whatever you want to do, right? I mean, we love
this. Is what I'm talking about.
Wow, we could do a course on this.
Yeah, I'm hooked.
So that Home Assistant plugin is solid. I think in some ways, sometimes it makes me jealous because I think their UI, like what he's built, is almost nicer than some of ours, right? So,
yeah.
One guy pushing the boundaries like that.
Yep, yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, that was my final question. Dan, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for doing this. I know this was maybe the most random thing you've done this week, but this has been a delight. And tell the people where they can find you, where they can find Flair. Give us your last pitch here.
Sure. You can learn more about our offerings, whether for smart vents on central systems and solving hot and cold rooms, or ductless heat pump or mini split controls on flair.co, FLAIR.co.
All right.
Perfect.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan. It was nice to meet you, and thanks for doing this.
Likewise. Great to meet you guys. Have a good one.
All right. See ya.
Thanks. Bye. All right.
Look at How about that? What a great guy.
Yet again, Aaron Francis comes through with you could just do stuff and stuff happen. Just ask the CEO of the company to come on your podcast and maybe they'll come on.
You know what? I tweeted at him and he didn't respond. And so I went to flair.co and looked up their media email and sent an email to media@flair.co and gave him a little pitch that was like, listen, we're cool. We're funny. People are going to love it. And then he responded and was like, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, he didn't seem like a big Twitter guy. He only has a couple hundred followers there, so I was surprised he was right on it. But you went the next layer.
I
Very
went the
good
back
job.
channel. I also sent him a DM on LinkedIn, man.
Yeah.
There's no stopping me.
People, get out there and just do stuff, okay? How many times do we have to tell you? Just do stuff.
And how delightful was it? What a
it was
what a great
great.
segment. Great segment.
Yeah, so he was great. I think he was very fair too. I think he made some great points about like you shouldn't just buy our solution and deck your whole house out with this because that would be ridiculous. He said in nicer, so many.
I don't
words,
think he said ridiculous.
yeah,
You said ridiculous.
But yeah, it would be ridiculous. But and in your case, you probably have access to the stuff, so HVAC guy could probably just come in and make zones, and you'd be fine.
I am going to have an HVAC guy come look to make sure that nothing is like mechanically broken or disturbed.
Could just be broken. That's
it could just be
the
the duct to my room is loose or whatever.
Right. So once you know that, you could get an estimate for what it would be to do it their way, and then you could compare. But the idea of maybe doing a couple rooms and seeing if you can just yourself push it over.
That was a great idea. That was very obvious when he said it. Like, you don't need to close off the hot rooms, so why buy a vent? Like, okay, that's a good point.
I like it.
And it seems like he's one of us. He's talking about bootstrapping. He's talking about Reddit. Like, he's a man of the people.
I did have a little bit of a sour post that I deleted, but because they're not actually like their background that they claim on their website is that they're from Skype and internet startup-y companies, right? Not necessarily HVAC people. But it seems like they've been around. Like we didn't get into this. They raised like a Series A like 2 years ago. So I don't know, but he said they've been around longer.
Yeah, we should have dug into the business.
Maybe
more.
We could have dug into the business a little bit. That's right. He can come back in the future.
Being around for 10 years, pretty good sign.
That is. It's a little weird. They don't talk about the other stuff. I don't know. I have questions. Don't get me wrong.
No, Ian, you're looking for stuff now. You're looking.
But it seems fine. I mean, obviously he addressed the main thing, which is like we might be gone tomorrow. And you should factor that in.
He was
and
very
there's no way to control these things without us, right? Which also is little weird to me.
Now.
Yeah,
he did say they've got the bridge and they're going to do an OTA update at some point.
Right, it's not there yet. So that'll be nice. I do think like to be totally, it's a little different than your vacuum or something like that, which A is just less critical, but also B, I think probably still works. Like it's not going to get updates and things like that, but like it kind of sounded like this system doesn't even work if they were to go away. So that would be probably a problem. Like
for
all
now,
this locked, closed, or
I think
open,
I read on a power failure, like the batteries got. I think they lock open. I think that's their fail safe.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the same as the code being like this connection with the server or whatever. But yes, but it sounds like they're going to be around long enough at the very least to build their plug-and-play network bridge that runs in offline mode. So that would be cool. Another thing to buy. So, yeah. But
I'm convinced.
I still think there's a lot of thinking with it, which the other solution has no think. I literally haven't thought about it in 15 years, and that's a lot to be said for that versus this thing like I have an app and I got a thing and thing. I don't know. But yes, it's a more reasonable solution, especially if it's a smaller number of rooms. I think they should change their name to HVAC OS. I think that's way better name than Flair. Like, yeah, I think that's just a way cooler, more interesting, more direct. Like,
it's not very consumer. HVAC OS is not very consumer.
I don't know, isn't it? I feel like people know what HVAC is. I feel like they know what HVAC is. They don't know what Flair is. If I said Flair to you, what is that?
Why would I want an HVAC OS? I'm like, no, I got an Ecobee.
Yeah.
I don't need an HVAC OS.
I don't know what an Ecobee is.
I got a Nest, let's say. I got a Nest thermostat. I'm a consumer. I got a Nest thermostat. What's an HVAC OS?
I don't know. I think people are okay. It's like you got your Mac OS, your iPhone OS. People hear these terms like my HVAC OS. This is the OS for my home HVAC. Like,
that's
cool. Yeah, it's
so cool.
I think they should do that. Hopefully they're listening to this. Change your name.
Oh, he's listening because we were like, hey, great. Okay, you can leave. We're going to talk about you now. So, of course, he's listening.
We're going to bash you. No, we're not bashing.
You're going to bash him. I'm not going to bash him. He's my hero. Yeah.
I didn't even bash. I think it was all very good. So, we're going to release this as a special episode. So, everybody will be a little treat in the feed. We'd love to give treats in the feed. That'll be fun.
We'd love to give treats in the feed. If there's one thing Ian and I love, it's giving treats in the feed.
That's such a good show title. I don't think we can actually use it. It would be so off point, but Treats in the Feed is a great title.
Treats in the Feed is so deranged.
Maybe that's what we build. When we build our own podcast, like somehow connected to our little podcast ad network or something, Treats in the Feed. be our company
Justin
name.
Jackson, if you're listening, I need a checkbox on Transistor that just says "add treats in the feed." And you can decide. You can decide what it does. I just want treats in the feed.
Man, that's a damn good idea. I think we just came up with a business idea right here. No, treats in the feed, because you know
treats
you
in the feed is nothing.
No, it's a great idea because look at just think about it. You hate when like people you listen to a podcast every week and you get the podcast and you listen to it right away, and then you have nothing to do for a week. It's like, oh, I gotta wait till next week. Yes,
I do hate that.
Don't you love it when 3 days in there's a treat in the feed?
There's
it's like,
a treat in the feed.
They dropped a random show.
Yeah.
Off schedule.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
It's so good. It can't be all the time because then it's not a treat. Because then it's not a part of your schedule.
Exactly.
It's gotta be once every month or two. Boom. Treat in the feed.
Man, is there any problem we can't solve? Is there any business we can't start?
We
this
can
is
do it
crazy.
all.
Treats in the feed.
I wish we had the money. This is why I always, along with movie producer,
right?
Investor would be fun too, because it's just like, we're just out there sprinkling money, solving problems. Here's some ideas.
Would be fun. Yeah.
Just like then we go off and do whatever. We're not building the solution. We're not talking to customers.
We just get to claim credit for it when it works.
I just want the credit and the money.
That's all I want.
And without the
credit and the money. I'm a simple man. I just want the credit and the money, not the work. For goodness sakes,
the work is terrible. Forget the work.
Oh man! All right, mostly HVAC. What a good show. That was a great show.
It was a good one. All right, see y'all later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.